As the prophet of esports, I rely on trustworthy and meaningful data every day. Data from our research partner, YouGov, offers the most complete view of esports fans and gamers in the world, providing context to who they are, what they think, the brands they buy, and things they do. YouGov's connected insights and research services inform strategy at every level. If you're a team, a brand, agency, or rights holder, you should be talking with YouGov. Their partners measure and maximize ROI and are telling compelling stories with data. Visit yougov.com/gaming-esports to learn more.
This one, I wasn't happy about this next topic, guys. I really wasn't. But it's one I called so long ago. I mean, this is a prophet was right moment. But I never like to see failure. I really don't, because I'm only a cheerleader for the industry more than anything. And this one was interesting here. It was a message that was announced. I actually don't know where it came from, but it was someone from the PlayVS sort of community team that had put out a message to their collegiate community. So the partners they have on the colleges that they have signed up. And basically saying, I won't read this whole thing, that PlayVS is pulling out of college esports, pulling out of colleges as a customer completely. So they will not be serving colleges. They will not be running college esports tournaments. They won't be selling anything to colleges anymore. And instead, they're going to focus only on high schools, which is where they're going to put all their time and effort, I guess. I had called PlayVS's decline and most likely failure probably a couple of years ago now, because I saw the writing on the wall. I'm curious what you guys think of this, like sort of moving out of college esports, because I obviously have some thoughts on this, but I'm curious what you guys conclude from PlayVS moving out of college and supposedly wanting to focus more just on high school. Jimmy, maybe start with you, being,
colleges
the
aren't
esports
spending
professor than you are.
Yeah, colleges aren't spending. It's hard enough to get a program dedicated to any university, and there's no one way to go about it. Depending on what college you're looking at, you're talking about a club versus something that gets has to get approved by a regents board or whatever. However they're structured, there's so much red tape around colleges to even get the program itself approved. And then when you look at how they're marketing and how they're attracting and going about developing that program or that initiative, it's kind of mind-blowing, because you look at college sports, traditional sports, mostly basketball and football, with just massive spends. And then what is it, Title IX, right, where they have to do equal spending on women's sports, which is a wonderful initiative. But when you look at what they're spending on traditional sports, you just wonder why they're not doing that or anything close to any one of those sports here in esports. So, kudos to PlayVS, I guess, for getting out, because I don't know if high school is going to be that much better for them, honestly. But it just seems, and it's kind of sad for us, because again, we're cheerleaders of this industry, and we want to showcase the good. Last week we had an ed tech company on the show to talk about different ways to think about integrating esports with an elementary kind of a schooling level. But if you don't see a college leading the way, and if you don't see a lot of high schools also that are other, I don't want to say movers and shakers, but kind of these prime examples of how great this integration can be for a student as opposed to a working professional or a young competitive player. It's just sad. It's sad that the colleges aren't investing enough in the space. And I think PlayVS is not going to be the first company that pulls out of that area. I was in that area 3 years ago, and thanks to the prophet here, I got out very early. So I think it's unfortunately going to continue to happen. All we can hope for are that there will be some colleges like where Paul and I both teach that will continue to support it, that will provide an academic foundation, not just competitive, and that hopefully that will at least keep that interest there, or keep the students. It will enable them to do what they want to do and maybe we'll see growth later. But this isn't really surprising, honestly. It's just sad.
Jeff, I'm curious, do you agree that the problem is the market here, like the colleges themselves, or is this probably more a PlayVS problem?
I'm definitely interested to hear your take. I don't know is my honest answer. I think you can convince me, or you can potentially convince me that maybe it's an easier sales cycle to sell into high schools. Obviously, there are a lot more high schools than there are colleges, right? Like there's realistically probably 100 or 200 colleges that do esports, period. Whereas high schools, there's literally in the state of California, there's probably 10,000 high schools. So, you could convince me it's a much larger addressable market. I'm not sure the sales cycle is different, but if the sales funnel is different and for whatever reason it harms your ability to sell into or it's a different process to sell into colleges, and it's like, hey, it's inefficient for us to have these two sales teams, two sales funnels, two sales resources. Maybe you could convince me this is a actual smart business move and not just a retreat. But I think that your argument that you're about to make is probably going to be more compelling than I think you're going to make. So please enlighten us.
No, I wish I had a sort of a good argument. Unfortunately, I think this was just kind of basic. It's and I remember I go back to that PAX panel that I was on. I don't even know how many years it's been now, 2 or 3 years ago, I guess now, where there was someone, I think they were working at a college, got up and said, because I had made some comments about PlayVS, and PlayVS had all the trappings of seeming mismanagement, right? Like the CEO posing with his, Lamborghini on Instagram, and they raised, $90 million, like 2 months after they raised $60 million, right? Like there's a whole bunch of red flags that felt a little wrong. And I made those comments on the panel, and I said, look, I probably don't, I do see the future. And on this one, I think this ends in a, fiery failure and a bunch of hot garbage. And this guy stood up and said, look, we're PlayVS customers, and the experience is awful. Like, it's actually awful. And unfortunately, there aren't many other options, but we've had a horrible time with them. And that to me was the nail in the coffin. Like, you get a review like that from someone working at a college and using the product, and the product's no good. Eventually it's going to fail, right? Like, I just think the product was no good. There was a lot of hype artificially generated because of all the money they raised. And fundamentally the lack of execution, and didn't deliver on whatever their promise to those colleges was. So, I don't think it's any more complicated than that. I think honestly, and Jimmy, this is where I disagree with you. There are specific cases where the college the companies going after the college opportunity are doing it completely wrong. Like, there's a bunch of people doing, broadcasting college tournaments. Like, I don't think anyone cares to watch average, like, amateur college players playing Rocket League against each other, right? Like, to me, that's a fool's errand. But I do think there's a massive number of college students who would like to compete, and there's opportunity to sell stuff to them, or to give them, products, services, tech, whatever. I just think PlayVS has always focused more. It was more sizzle than steak. And this is starting to now, sometimes my prophecies come true, but it takes a while for them to come true. And this is just one of them that over time, PlayVS is going to run out of money, and the product's going to be no good. And the retreat here, I guarantee, is probably to cut their burn because they are running out of money. And it's no more complicated than that. So, but I do think, just to finish my point, the college opportunity is a massive one, huge, right? And that no one has really done anything that great with yet. And not to take away, Jimmy's point was good. It is hard. It's not simple, but I don't think this is one where it was the college audience that was the problem. Jeff, is that what you thought I was going to say?
Yeah, for the most part. Yeah.
All right, guys. Lindsay, I don't know if you have any thoughts on this before we move on.
Classic theme: bad management usually leads bad results.
It's funny how consistent it is.